What if I told you that one of the most important infrastructure projects in North America is suddenly being turned into a political weapon? What if billions of dollars in trade, thousands of jobs, and a symbol of cross-border cooperation were being threatened, not because of facts, but because of a social media post? Stay with me, because what's happening right now between Donald Trump and Canada over the Gordie Howe International Bridge is bigger than a bridge. It's about misinformation, economic leverage, and the future of U.S.-Canada relations. Donald Trump is once again doing what he has done throughout his political career. He is making sweeping accusations without evidence. He is threatening international partners without justification. He is using misinformation as a political weapon. And this time, his target is Canada. Once again, he is claiming that Canada has taken advantage of the United States. Once again, he is demanding compensation for something America did not pay for. Once again, he is threatening economic disruption based on claims that are demonstrably false. And once again, Canada's leaders are being forced to clean up the damage.
Also making news on this Tuesday morning, Canada once again in the crosshairs of Donald Trump. In a social media post last night, Trump threatening to actually block the opening of the new Gordie Howe Bridge, which connects Windsor and Detroit. In this over 400-word post, Trump listing several concerns, including U.S. alcohol being pulled from Canadian shelves, to claims that Canada wants to make a deal with China, which he claims would spell the end of ice hockey and the Stanley Cup, as you can see there on your screen. And Trump also saying that he will not allow this newly built bridge to open until the U.S. is, quote, fully compensated for everything we have given them.
Today we are breaking down Donald Trump's latest attack on Canada centered around the Gordie Howe International Bridge connecting Windsor and Detroit. In a rambling social media post that quickly went viral across political news platforms, Trump threatened to block the opening of the bridge. He demanded financial compensation. He accused Canada of exploiting the United States. He suggested America was excluded from the project. He implied billions were owed. But here's the key question. Do any of those claims hold up under basic scrutiny? The answer is no. Trump's latest outburst revolves around one central claim, that Canada somehow owes the United States billions of dollars for the Gordie Howe Bridge, that America was excluded from the project, and that Canada is taking advantage of Washington. Let's talk facts. Canada paid the full construction cost, which exceeds $6 billion. Not partially. Not mostly. Fully. The bridge will be jointly owned by Canada and the state of Michigan. American workers were involved in construction. American steel was used. And here's something that often gets forgotten in the outrage cycle. Trump himself previously called the project vital and fast-tracked it back in 2017. So what changed? This is not a misunderstanding. This is not a minor accounting dispute. This is a public narrative built on incorrect information. And the controversy didn't stop at the bridge. Trump's post also accused Canada of undermining American alcohol sales. He claimed Canada was plotting trade alignment with China. He even suggested Canada was somehow threatening hockey and the Stanley Cup. Yes, the Stanley Cup. Ask yourself, is this serious policy discussion, or is it political theater? Even journalists covering the story described the post as meandering, unfocused, and filled with false assertions. Observers noted that Trump is increasingly surrounded by advisors who reinforce misinformation rather than challenge it. That creates a dangerous feedback loop. False claims become political talking points. Talking points become threats. Threats become diplomatic crises. And who pays the price for that cycle? Workers. Businesses. Families on both sides of the border. Rather than escalating the rhetoric, Prime Minister Mark Carney responded with facts. Calmly. Directly. Without theatrics. He explained clearly that Canada paid for the bridge. Ownership is shared. Both Canadian and American workers participated. Both economies benefit. Cross-border commerce depends on it. Carney framed the project not as a point of conflict, but as a symbol of cooperation between two of the world's closest allies.
The U.S. president insists Canada must fully compensate the U.S. That's despite the fact that more than $6 billion in cost was entirely funded by Canada for the bridge. And Trump himself called the project vital back in 2017. Now, the Prime Minister was asked about Trump's bridge ultimatum as he head into cabinet earlier today. Here's what Mark Carney had to say about a call he had with the U.S. president.
We discussed the bridge. I explained that Canada, of course, paid for the construction of the bridge, over $4 billion, that the ownership is shared between the state of Michigan and the government of Canada, and that in the construction of the bridge, obviously there's Canadian steel, Canadian workers, but also U.S. steel, U.S. workers that were involved. This is a great example of cooperation between our countries.
His response demonstrated institutional maturity. He corrected misinformation without inflaming tensions. He defended Canadian interests without personal attacks. He reaffirmed the value of partnership. Now compare that to threatening to block a bridge that carries billions of dollars in trade annually. Trump's threat to block the bridge is not only unjustified. It is economically irrational. The Windsor-Detroit corridor is one of the busiest trade routes in North America. Billions of dollars in goods cross it every year. Auto parts, agricultural products, manufacturing components. Thousands of American jobs depend on that flow of commerce. Michigan, Ohio, and the Midwest rely heavily on cross-border supply chains. So here's a serious question. Who would actually be hurt first if that bridge were blocked? Not Ottawa. Not Toronto. It would be American workers and American businesses. Even Democratic leaders in Michigan publicly rejected Trump's claims and confirmed that the bridge will open. They emphasized its economic importance. They dismissed the accusations as unfounded. That reveals something important. Trump's rhetoric is disconnected from economic consequences. Ontario Premier DougFord went even further. He openly questioned whether Trump would follow through, not out of goodwill, but out of political self-interest. Ford pointed out that harming cross-border trade would damage the American economy and hurt Republicans in upcoming elections. Think about that dynamic. A Canadian premier calculating American electoral consequences more rationally than the person making the threat. Ford framed Trump's comments as political theater rather than serious policy. But he didn't stop there. He backed it up with facts. Trump said America had no ownership stake. False. Ownership is shared. Trump said no U.S. workers were involved. False. American workers participated. Trump said no U.S. materials were used. False. American steel and materials were part of the project. Ford responded directly and publicly. This wasn't spin. It was verification. It showed that Trump's narrative collapses under minimal scrutiny.
The president says that the U.S. should have an ownership stake, that there was no U.S. content built in its production, and that U.S. workers weren't employed as it was built. The premier is saying this morning none of that's true, that the ownership structure is such that Canada and the Michigan government own it, that U.S. workers were employed, and that U.S. materials were used in construction of the bridge. Now, he's saying more broadly, though, that his advice to the Prime Minister, to Prime Minister Carney, when it comes to this, is not roll over, to not give in to the president's demands. Let's hear from the premier again.
This is my message to the Prime Minister and the people of Canada. This is not the time to roll over and let President Trump take advantage of us. Keep saying that we've taken advantage of the Americans. Contrary to what I believe in, it's the other way around.
Perhaps the most important moment came when Ford addressed Canada's broader response. He warned against appeasement. He urged the federal government not to roll over. He rejected the idea that Canada has taken advantage of the United States. And he emphasized that Canada deserves respect. This wasn't about escalating tensions. It wasn't about hostility. It was about self-respect. It was about setting boundaries. It was about refusing to accept false accusations as the basis for negotiations. Now let's zoom out. Because this isn't just about concrete and steel. What is really driving this latest outburst? It's not the bridge. It's not compensation. It's not construction costs. It's loss of control. For decades, the United States held overwhelming economic leverage over Canada because it was Canada's dominant trading partner. That dependence shaped negotiations. It limited Canada's options. It created an imbalance that Washington could use in trade disputes. But under Prime Minister Mark Carney, that dynamic has changed. Canada has expanded trade with Europe, strengthened ties with Asia, diversified supply chains, Reduced exposure to political instability in Washington. In other words, Canada adjusted strategically. As a result, American leverage has declined. And Trump knows it. And here's the irony. That loss of influence is largely the result of his own confrontational trade policies. By weaponizing tariffs. By undermining trust. By turning trade into a constant threat, he pushed partners to diversify. Canada responded strategically. Trump responded emotionally. These exaggerated threats and false accusations are not signs of strength. They are signs of frustration. They reflect an attempt to reassert control that is no longer there. Ask yourself, if America truly had the leverage it once did, would threats be necessary? Or would cooperation come naturally? Trump is reacting to a reality he helped create. And these attacks are increasingly desperate efforts to regain leverage he has already lost. Donald Trump's latest attack on Canada is built on false premises. Canada paid for the bridge. Canada shared the benefits. Canada cooperated in good faith. The accusations are wrong. The threats are reckless. The rhetoric is irresponsible. But here's where it gets even more interesting. This episode isn't just about U.S.-Canada relations. It's about how misinformation spreads in modern politics. A social media post becomes a headline. A headline becomes outrage. Outrage becomes diplomatic tension. And suddenly, millions of people are debating claims that fall apart under basic fact-checking. How many viewers saw the original accusation, but never saw the correction? How many people heard Canada owes billions without hearing Canada paid the full cost? That's how narratives take hold. And that's why leadership matters. Mark Carney responded with facts. DougFord responded with resolve. Both demonstrated that Canada will not accept misinformation as diplomacy. They showed that leadership means correcting lies, defending national interests, and refusing to be intimidated. This is how serious countries respond to unserious threats. But here's the cliffhanger: if rhetoric like this continues, what happens next? Does economic cooperation survive constant political turbulence? Do supply chains remain stable? Do voters begin to question the cost of performative politics? Or does this become the new normal in North American trade relations? The Gordie Howe International Bridge was meant to symbolize connection between Windsor and Detroit, between Canada and the United States, between two economies deeply intertwined. Instead, it has become a case study in how misinformation can threaten stability. And yet, despite the noise, the bridge is set to open. Trade will flow. Workers will cross. Goods will move. Reality, eventually, overrides rhetoric. But the broader question remains. How many times can this cycle repeat before real damage occurs? That's why conversations like this matter. Because behind the headlines are facts. Behind the outrage are economic consequences. And behind the political theater are real people whose livelihoods depend on stability. So I want to hear from you. Do you think this was political strategy or political miscalculation? Do you see this as a negotiating tactic or as misinformation spiraling out of control? And what does this mean for the future of U.S.-Canada trade relations? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Let's have a serious, fact-based discussion. If you value fact-based analysis, strong Canadian leadership, and breaking down political theatre with clarity, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. Thank you for watching. And we will see you next time.